Our scripture reading today is from the book of Matthew, and Jesus is speaking. He said, "Don't store up earthly treasures for yourselves, which moths and rust destroy, and thieves can break in and steal. But store up for yourselves in heaven, where neither but store up treasures for yourselves in heaven, where neither moth nor rust can destroy them, and thieves cannot break in and steal them. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be as well. The lamp of the body is the eye. If your eye is sound, your whole body will be filled with light. But if your eye is diseased, your whole body will be in darkness. And if the light inside you is darkness, how great that darkness will be. No one can serve two superiors. You will either hate one and love the other, or be attentive to one and despise the other. You cannot give yourself to God and money." Ancient words for today's consideration.
Hi, my name's Jim. Haven't been here in a while. But it's kind of like that. So have you been worried about anything lately? That maybe I should talk about today. I'm so glad that we started on the Sermon on the Mount way back. I just figured with the church in the United States, a huge part of the problem was so much of the church saying things Jesus never said and calling people to a cruelty and an ignorance and a superstition that doesn't help anybody, including the people who are trying to maintain the appearance of Christianity. That by going back to what Jesus actually taught, we might find a foundation that will get us through this next however long it is. Because the truth is, as important as this election is, and it's almost certainly the most important election we will have in our lifetimes, to realize that for much of the world, it won't make that much difference. Neither side is going to deal with the sweatshops in Micronesia. Neither is going to bring justice to the Middle East, most likely. For the poorest of the poor, for immigrants, we have to realize, and I've never told people how to vote. I never will, and you probably can't figure out how I feel. But we need to vote for humankind if we're going to call ourselves Christian. As smart as Jesus was, he never once mentioned the flag, gun rights, the importance of boundaries of nations. And the church lies when it says he did. When we look at how Jesus treated women, he never said, "I'm going to rescue you, whether you want me to or not." But that's not a rescue, that's a kidnapping. So there's a whole lot on the line in one sense. In another sense, for the most marginalized and powerless, it's going to be Tweedledee and Tweedledum. It's our privilege that makes it so different. We don't want to lose the privilege we have and be like the people that we cooperate in their oppression. We need to do better no matter what. So as much as we want, a lot of us want the election to go a certain way, We have a certain charter either way to advocate for human rights at a level that politicians don't do. We have to realize the pressures on them are different. The church needs to speak for humanity, for nature, for life. So when we look at these next few days, when our neck is in the gallows too, to think through what we're afraid of losing and realize that a lot of people never have had it in the first place. Fascism did not come with Donald Trump. Fascism came over on the Mayflower. If you were a person of color, if you were a person of a female persuasion, if you were unlanded. So we need to be the ones that advocate for universal human rights and in defense of the web of life that can't speak for itself. So I want us to think these next few days, I'm inviting you to anyway, what is your foundation for living? Does your spirituality inform that at all? Because most of us went to Sunday school and learned Christianity within the context of Americanism. We learned Christianity within the context of capitalism. We advocate for things that Jesus condemned and condemn things that Jesus advocated. It seems to me that if we're going to call ourselves Christian, Jesus should get some kind of vote a little bit on what the message is. And if you turn to the Sermon on the Mount, you find a radically different message than you're going to find in 95% of the churches across the country. Again, that's not arguable. Just turn to the Sermon on the Mount and read it and say, have I ever heard that in a church sermon? Is there a sense of truth that's going to hold up to the wave of lies and propaganda that are going to happen regardless of who wins? If the election goes well, there's still going to be the fact that you can't turn to the web and find anything reliable. In fact, you can't find any mainstream media, or very, 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 very few, that are not beholden to the powers that be. That you have the people covering our foreign wars, reporting on the wars. Is there a truth that we can bring to the world as people of faith? I'm not even talking about being Christian. I'm talking about being deeply human and feeling the tie that binds you to every other being. I don't care whether you believe in God or not. I don't think Jesus really cared that much. He used that kind of symbolic language, but it seems to me the important thing is whether you believed in love or not. What is your idea of power? As a child in school, you were probably taught to succeed over and against your friends. If anything, to sell them out so that you can be successful and powerful. It's not your fault. At the same time, somebody's oppression is tied to that idea of power and success. Can we find a sense of power and self-determination that doesn't rely on dominating anybody? Is that possible? And then finally, a lot of us were taught a sense of self-worth that comes from succeeding at some artificial measure of worth. Capitalism is just one name for it. But anything that you use to measure human worth diminishes the infinite worth. You can't measure the worth of a tree much less a human being. There's nothing in all of industry that's worth topsoil. If you destroy the topsoil, you destroy the species. So you can't measure that kind of wealth using capitalism or any other economic system. Is there a foundation that will give us peace regardless of what happens? I don't think it's ever a mistake to think through what the foundation of your living is in your life. What are you betting your life on? What assumptions? Jesus said, the eye is the light of the body. Let's think about that for a moment. In the ancient world, they thought the eye sent out a beam, an eye beam. So it was like a lamp that would send out this light. And he said, if the light within you is darkness, what do you think he means by that? Here's what I think. I think Jesus was more like Buddha than the American Jesus. He was talking about awareness, not belief. It was in Europe that it got reframed to be a belief system. But if you look at the Sermon on the Mount, he's trying to wake us up, to inflame our hearts and curiosity in mind. The eye is the light of the body. If you believe lies, even if the church taught you those lies, your body will fill with darkness. If you have a prejudice, that's going to block out the light. You think you're seeing the real world, but you're seeing your opinions of the world. If you believe propaganda, if you believe Puerto Rico is a pile of garbage, and you've also been taught never fact check. Because if you're going to be successful in MAGA, you need to never fact check. And what we're talking about is frightened people, frustrated people, people in despair, metaphysical despair, being taken advantage of. These are our brothers and sisters. This is our human family. When we're aware, I think Jesus called that faith. And sometimes doubt is closer to faith than belief is. When you don't know, faith is saying, I don't know, and waiting for the ideas to get clear. In these last years, there's been a pseudoscientific movement that is just bewildering to anybody who's ever studied science. What is so frightening about reality? Why are people so afraid to live there? Jesus said that when you don't perceive the world honestly, your body fills with darkness. But you think it's light. You think it's information. You think it's knowledge. And what he's saying is you have to let yourself empty of belief so that you can become aware. He sometimes called it being born again. Leaving your memories about the world long enough to look out actually and see through your own eyes. What is really there? When you look at the people of the world, it's your family. There's nobody that doesn't belong here. So how does that truth inform you? In the early nation, Thomas Paine had an idea of democracy. He was limited by his background, of course, but he realized that there's not going to be democracy if people believe lies. Reason is very important. And you're a better patriot if you're willing to lose an argument to be honest and reasonable than if you insist on what you were taught just because you're too afraid to investigate. Here's what Thomas Paine said, "When a people have so corrupted and prostituted the chastity of their minds as to profess things they do not believe, they have prepared themselves for the commission of every other crime." When a people have so far corrupted and prostituted the chastity of their minds as to profess things they do not believe, they have prepared themselves for the commission of every other crime. How many people were raised in the church reciting creeds that made no sense to you, but you were told to pretend like you believe that? If you're willing to lie to yourself about Jesus, then every other crime is just down the road a little bit. That's not what Jesus asked of you. Your eye is the light of your body. Not the Bible, not the preacher, not a politician. That honest search for truth, even when it's through confusion and fog, is more faithful than pretending to believe things that don't really make sense to you. There was a man whose country fell to fascism. And somebody said, how did that happen to such a wonderful country? And he said, "We were poisoned by fairy tales." Poisoned by fairy tales. Stories that are charming, but they aren't true. Symbols like the flag that are no replacement for constitutions, but stir the emotions. So the first thing I think Jesus is saying to us is look out at life through your own eyes. Don't let anyone else tell you what to think, because that train's going to go to a place, and you're going to wake up someday with blood on your hands. So don't even get on the train in the first place. Trust the wisdom within you. Then second, what is your idea of power? What makes you powerful? I know that I was taught as a young boy to stay in control of things. And I was told that's what women want. You can guess how that worked out. But it took me a long time because I trusted the roots that I had been given. That people want me to succeed and be powerful and hover over them and lead them. What poverty there was inside me, what cowardice that I thought was my strength and my courage. Jesus says something that's going to sound really mythological. He says, "Store up treasures in heaven, not on earth." Heaven was a synonym for the will of God. Heaven meant the way of things, the way of life, the way of nature. It's not like a castle in the sky. It's like a river that runs through everything. And to follow that, to listen to it, to let that be your guide, is more helpful than any book, any teacher, any leader. Fascism teaches people to have power by domination. It's a sense of worth that comes from being better than other people, laughing at other people, embarrassing other people. Jesus did satire of the powerful, but you're not going to find any place where he makes fun of the weak or the sick. So somebody who makes fun of the weak and the sick, the mentally ill, somebody who's born in a different culture, that doesn't make them inferior. This was a tweet That's not what they call it anymore, but I don't care. You realize, I feel like I'm helping these people by saying the correct names. You realize how few billionaires now control almost everything in this country? When has even a Democrat busted up a monopoly in recent memory? So we got a lot to work to do in any case. But if you're the human being who calls for compassion, you're doing everything that you can possibly do. This was the tweet. I feel like too many people don't recognize fascism because they think fascism will arrive selling oppression and tyranny. But if you're part of the privileged group, fascism is selling you safety, normalcy, and tradition. Right? If you're in the privileged group, what somebody is telling you is that people without your privileges are coming at you. They're trying to rob you. They're laughing at you. That is like the axle of fascism and demagoguery. So we reject it. What is that power that you can have that doesn't require anybody else's domination? It's your character, is it not? Even people in the Holocaust realized that there was a power they had to make their decisions, to live with integrity that was stronger than the entire artifice of the fascist state. You can leave here today with a commitment to that notion of power and realize that that changes the world. It makes such a difference not to participate in anyone else's domination. The final thing we need to learn, I think, from this teaching is not to get our sense of worth from any artificial system, not just capitalism, any system that grades human beings, that evaluates their worth. Human beings are the source of worth, not the system. Living beings are the source of value. Jesus says in our passage, you cannot serve God and man. But see, that's more disgusting than me. I mean, I hint at it, but Jesus came out and said it. You can't really serve the sacred if you're beholden to an artificial system of value. It's not going to happen. The system will lead you astray. The system will sell you out. If you have free markets and you have a leader who runs the state like a business, they're going to sell the government out from under your feet. In a purely unregulated capitalist state, everything is for sale. Do you really want your institutions of justice to be for sale? Jesus was trying to teach us that sometimes we love objects like people and people like objects. When corporations are persons, but immigrants aren't. When fetuses are considered persons, but women are collective property. But they belong to the state if they get pregnant. And that doesn't cause a sacred fury on behalf of half of the nation. Cyprian was an early Christian saint. I'm closing in on this. We're getting close to the end. The early church was much more militant against wealth. It's not that some people have something. That's not a problem. But if some people are hoarding huge amounts while other people do without enough to survive, that wasn't just wrong, that was a sin. This is St. Cyprian, and talking about what wealth does to the human soul. Their property held them in chains. Chains, he's speaking of the rich. Their property held them in chains. Chains which shackled their courage and choked their faith and hampered their judgment and throttled their soul. If they stored up their treasures in heaven, they would not now have an enemy and a thief within their own household. They think of themselves as owners, where it is they, rather, who are owned. Enslaved as they are to their own property, they are not the masters of their money, but its slaves. So think about where your value comes from and emptying what you were taught to weigh yourself on any scale whatsoever. You are of infinite worth. You measured the systems by humanity, by life, by the web of life. So this is a time of great challenge. There's so much on the line, in one sense. In another sense, there's a depth within you that can do this. Regardless of what happens, there's a peace within you that can be there. There's a joy within you if you go deep enough within yourself. This was a conservative, I guess a country western singer, Christian musician. I don't listen to Christian music, but I like this one. And this is, conservative is not the problem. Conservative is not the problem at all. It's cruelty, superstition, ignorance. This is a very conservative person who's being moved by the Sermon on the Mount, I guess. He goes, "Which Jesus do you follow? Which Jesus do you serve? My Jesus spent his time with thieves and the least of these. He loved the poor and accosted the comfortable. So which one do you want to be? Because my Jesus would never be accepted at my church. The blood and dirt on his feet might stain the carpet. Because my Jesus bled and died. He loved the poor and accosted the arrogant. So which one do you want to be? Blessed are the poor in spirit. Or do we pray to be blessed with the wealth of this land? Blessed are they that hunger and thirst for righteousness. Or do we ache for another taste of this world of shifting sand?" Since we're in a crisis, we might as well learn from it. What's the worst of times politically can be the best of times spiritually. But we're forced to go deeper than we're comfortable going. So asking yourself, what is my notion of truth? Am I looking through my own eyes, or am I believing what somebody else has said? Jesus says your eye is the light of the body. You will be a lighthouse for others if you're authentic. What is your notion of power? Jesus was nonviolent, but he wasn't manipulated by anybody or controlled by anybody. His character was his greatest treasure, and he would not compromise on that. Neither do we have to do that. And then finally, to realize that we've been taught to measure ourselves, to weigh ourselves, to judge ourselves on artificial values. Jesus is trying to help us understand that we are each of incalculable worth. You are of infinite worth. Your friends are of infinite worth. Your enemies are of infinite worth. There is a depth within you that can give you peace and joy, no matter what. Jesus is inviting us to consider these next few days, I think, what the foundation of our lives will be. Thank you for your kind attention. We'll take a moment for you to reflect on your own thoughts.